Welcome everybody. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. My name is Nick Karras, and I will be moderating today's exciting webinar on translating mobile phone data into transport and commuting statistics. We'll spend the next 2 hours together hearing from an incredible and diverse group of experts on their experiences, their challenges, and their successes when using mobile phone data to understand mobility patterns and to make decisions about how to improve transport systems. Now, I think this is an extremely timely and relevant topic, as we've recently seen how global events such as the COVID-19 pandemic and widespread natural disasters can create significant disruptions in travel patterns. And traditional statistics and data collection methods are not useful for short or even medium-term policy responses due to the extensive time lag between collection and publication. But mobile phone data, on the other hand, can offer dynamic insights about fast-evolving urban environments. And this new data source can also provide detailed insights about travel patterns in locations where traditional methods might not be feasible for any number of reasons. So this session will cover practical applications of mobile phone data in transport planning, policy, and the collection of national statistics. It will address some of the challenges of working with this data and then offer guidance on ethical and governance considerations as well. You'll hear about some very interesting use cases from around the world, such as how mobile phone data can inform public transport planning and operations, provide estimates of road traffic across an entire country, and how it can be integrated into household travel surveys. The session is hosted and organized by the UN Big Data and Data Science Regional Hub for Africa in collaboration with the UN Task Team on Mobile Phone Data. The Regional Hub for Africa is a platform to support projects across the continent that apply big data and data science to complement official statistics. They also offer knowledge on new analytical methods, algorithms, and tools, and provide training on big data and data science to official statisticians in Africa. And the Regional Hub for Africa does this through an extensive work program focused on 4 pillars: advocacy and leadership, capacity building, research, and then collaboration with the UN Global Platform. And I should mention the UN Task Team on Mobile Phone Data is a committee of distinguished experts, many of whom you will hear from today, whose objectives are to develop methods for using mobile phone data to address worldwide data gaps and support the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals. They have a number of methodological guides on the use of mobile phone data, which you will hear more about shortly. And they frequently conduct capacity workshops, training sessions, and awareness-raising events such as this webinar today. Now, if you're wondering who I am and why I'm moderating this session, today I'm representing the International Transport Forum, which is part of the OECD family. We're an intergovernmental organization with 66 member countries, 2 of which are in Africa, and we act as a think tank to promote transport policies that improve people's lives. We conduct a considerable amount of research on the use of mobile phone data in transport applications, and we've recently published guidelines for collecting and reporting mobile phone data for transport, for integrating mobile phone data into traditional travel surveys, and opportunities to improve mobility in rural areas using mobile phone data. We also do a number of case-specific policy analysis where we've used mobile phone data to study mobility in Africa specifically. We're nearly finished with a project that looks at how transport and land use policy can improve access to opportunities in Accra and Kumasi. And to evaluate the performance of the existing transport network in those cities, we relied heavily on mobile phone data. And we're also just now kicking off a study on enhancing freight connectivity in the East African community countries in partnership with the African Union Commission that is expected to use mobile phone data wherever possible to understand travel speeds and delays in the road network. So I would encourage you to visit the ITF website to learn more about the work that we do on this topic and on many others. Now, before we get started with the presentations, I will just briefly turn things over to Dr. Raj Kamalanath Sharma to give us an update on the recent activities of the UN Mobile Phone Data Subgroup. Dr. Kamalanath Sharma, the floor is yours.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Raj, and I'll be walking you through one of the handbooks that we have developed today as part of the UN sub-team on mobile phone data, which focuses on transport and commuting. But before that, I just want to take a minute and put things in perspective where our sub-team falls in. So Nick already mentioned the work that the UN Committee for Big Data, the experts in big data is doing. And under that, there are multiple tasks teams. One of them is basically using mobile phone data in statistics and other governmental use. There are other task teams as well. Now, under this task team, which is specifically for mobile phone data, we represent the sub-team, which is specifically on how to use mobile phone data for transport and commuting. So back in 2019, we had released one of our first editions of the handbook, which was more, I would say, technical aspects of how to use that mobile phone data from telco providers and the technical aspects of preparing that data to use in transport statistics specifically. And our latest handbook, which was released in a January event, just three months back. So that handbook specifically focuses on using MPD in transport and commuting, not just statistics, but in planning, in operations, and multiple uses. So the link that you see or the QR code that you see in this screen actually will take you to the handbook itself. As I said, we are already on the second edition, so it's a living document. So if you have, after reading, if you see more case studies that can be added to this handbook, of course, please let us know, and I'll give some next steps on this after this presentation. But in general, the handbook focuses on 4 aspects. One is, where does this handbook fit in? Like, who is the intended audience? Is it just statistical community, or is it something beyond that? So this specific handbook, we have made it very practitioner oriented. So if you are a transport practitioner, you can use this handbook to understand where the world is now in terms of using mobile phone data in transport and commuting. Secondly, we also talk about, in general, what are the novel sources of transport data, especially when it comes to new sources such as probe vehicle data, autonomous vehicle data, etc. The third one, we talk about applications in transport and commuting, and we have a spectrum of application starting from very strategic planning to more predictive and operational use cases. And lastly, we talk about different case studies that we have both internalized and recommended by the committee members to be added to the handbook. So if you go to the next slide. Before going to the next slide, actually, let me introduce myself. I'm actually part of Dubai's Roads and Transport Authority. I'm the Chief Data Specialist for the Public Transport Agency. And my colleague here, Bijit Deb, he will be also walking through the second half of this presentation. With that, now in this presentation, we will not walk through the full handbook. It will be just a high-level walkthrough of it, because obviously it's I think 25 to 30 page handbook. So I hope at least some of you will have the chance to go download it and read through it. It's also hosted on the wiki that we just displayed. We'll also put the link in the chat window. So the first thing that we discussed is the stakeholders. So when you think of the mobile phone data, right, it's actually the data that belongs to the users, the commuters. So we actually have to go through a cycle of getting this data from the commuters, collecting it, cleaning it, and finally using it as a community of transport professionals to improve the commute of the commuters itself. So that's why the stakeholder flow that we show as cyclic. And why this is important is because many of the commuters are also focused on privacy. So how does sharing this data with the transport division or the transport group will help me? So communicating this effectively with commuters is the first step that any transport agency should do. And so when you look at the flow, so the primary source of MNO, which is the basically the mobile network operator data or app-based location data, is the commuter itself. This is the first stakeholder and the most important. And then the data go through multiple steps. Sometimes there are data collectors and providers, which could be telco providers itself or telco operators itself. It could be some sort of app developers who put in some APIs to collect your location data, however they want to collect your location data. Once that is done, it's overseen by data regulators, which are either governmental or non-governmental entities. Depending on which region you live in, there can be very strict to very vague regulatory aspects that this data will have to go through. The next one is the authorized data processor, and then the data end user. So this is where the cleansed and processed data is ready for consumption. Yeah. So now sometimes there are companies who does all of this, basically second to the fourth step, and they are data brokers. And I think in the handbook itself, there are a couple of case studies from some of these data brokers. Sometimes data, maybe second and third functions is done by the same division, etc. So, but in general, this is the functionalities. In the last one is the benefactors, which either is the commuters themselves, or there could be external benefactors. For example, if you are using the transport or mobile phone data in statistics, then the benefactors are actual statistical communities who have now either easy access to statistical data or improving their business, etc. So that's the benefactors, and sometimes this is clubbed with the commuters itself. If you go to the next slide. So this is a very high level view of some of the transport applications of NPD. And you can see that from top left to the bottom right, it's getting more, I would say, time sensitive. The data time horizon, the latency, everything, and the complexity is also increasing. So the basic level of using mobile phone data is obviously for transport statistics. You can easily, with some processing, use mobile phone data to understand the origin destination of trips. What kind of modes do people use? What is the population density? So population density is even easier than origin destination, because now you only need to understand the number of subscribers in each zone. And more complex statistics like personal vehicle miles traveled, etc., can also be extracted from transport statistics. And the next one is traffic statistics. So once you have the transport statistics and more detailed information about the time space usage of mobile phone, you can go into the next level where you can understand the volume of traffic, the congested areas, the average speed of movement of certain highway corridors, etc. Then there are use cases for transport and urban planning, where you need much larger data set to identify commuting patterns, the modal split, the travel time index, etc. The next one is public transport planning. So here we'll have to basically have a little bit more detailed information about the transit usage, using dwell time at stations and all those things. So that's the next level. Then we can do the typical traffic analysis, for example, identifying patterns of congestion, roadwork related impacts, etc. If you know the start date and end date, and see how mobile phone data is distributed among those days. And until this, it's more of a reactive analysis. Now, the next three is more of a real-time operational support analysis. So the first one is typical operational decision support. So some of the examples that we have seen is cities using real-time population density data at event locations to understand whether to deploy additional shuttle buses and all those things. And the next one is events and crisis management. I think we already discussed the events one. The last one is more of a predictive analytics. So if you have daily traffic volumes, etc., from MPD, as well as from other sources, you can use it to predict the demand or the impact of potential road work and all those things. So this is the different transport application. Obviously, some of them are more advanced, and there are very little examples from around the world where they are purely focused on NPD. But at least the first 4 to 5 of them are pretty common nowadays. It wasn't the case maybe 5 years back. So many of the case studies that you'll read in the handbook are pretty recent. If you go to the next slide, I think, and starting here, I'll hand over to my colleague, Bijit. I think we lost the screen, Bijit. But he'll be talking mostly about the case studies and some of the examples that we have in the handbook of these transport-oriented applications of mobile phone data. Go ahead, Bijit.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Bijit. I'm working as a data architect in Road and Transport Authority Dubai, and also part of this MPD task team. Now, in this handbook, as Dr. Raj was mentioning, the different applications of MPD transport, we have tried to cover the use cases so that it can spread through all the different applications. But obviously, MPD is a sort of a novel data source, and there are not much use cases around the world. So if you guys download this handbook and you can read through it, and if you find there are certain other use cases that you want us to add it, please let us know. So we have covered three for this presentation. We are covering three use cases of MPD, which which we have covered in the handbook. One is the CEO's use of MPD in planning night bus service. The second use case is replacing Indonesia's household travel survey to delineate urban area. And also the third one is optimizing Dubai's bus laybys based on first and last mile. The first use case that we discuss here is the CEO's use of mobile phone data in planning night bus service. So the government of Seoul was facing a problem that the people from the lower income group who especially work in the night had to spend a lot of money in taxi or cab fares, or they had to walk a long distance to reach their destination, because there were not lot of bus services available in the night. Now, what Seoul government did, they partnered with the Korean telecom company, KT company, and they analyzed over 3 billion mobile call logs and 5 million taxi rides for over a month. And they were able to understand how the population moves in the night. Now, they could not take the traditional data sources like the ticketing data, which is available in the day, because the movement in the day and the movement in the night can be completely different, and it could actually lead to wrong analysis. So the only data that they could use was the mobile phone data, and also the taxi data that the people were using to go to their destination. And the result was the creation of the Owl Bus, which operates from 9 to 5 o'clock in the morning, serving the people from the lower income group. And they have they have saved approximately $1.2 million by introducing this bus service. The second case study that we covered is the replacing Indonesia's household travel service. So previously, Indonesia used to delineate their metropolitan area using household travel service. So in 2019, they wanted to use a new data source to delineate the urban area called Sekungan Bandung. So BPS Statistica Indonesia worked with Ministry of National Development and Planning, and they obtained the data from one of their largest MNO called Telkomsel, and they analyzed around 50,000 subscribers for 1 month, which is November 2019. And they also developed an algorithm to identify commuters and estimate commuting flow at the sub-district level. Now, once they analyzed this data, they found the previous delineation, which was done using the traditional source of household travel service, was completely different. So they were able to identify which subjects were included in the metropolitan area by law, but they have a low rate of commuting flow. So people were not moving into this area. So as a result, they recommended the new delineation and they determined a more appropriate delineation by using MPD. The third use case that we cover is by Dubai's RTA. Now, there is one bus station called Al Ghubaiba bus station in Dubai, which is a major transit area, and it's a huge area, and they have multiple exit and entry points. Now, each of this entry and exit points, they link to certain point of interest, such as a mall, a marine station, a bus station, and also a metro station. Now, so what RTA did, they saw that people had to walk a lot from where they are getting dropped off or they are getting onto the bus to their respective point of interest. Now, RTA along with Locatium, they collected anonymized smartphone-based GPS pings from a set of users whose journeys end or start in this Al Ghubaiba station. They analyze the dwell time to understand which way people coming from a different bus route, coming from a particular bus route, where they are moving, where they are coming from, or where they are going to. So whether for this particular bus route, when people get off at the bus station, whether they are going to catch the metro, or they are connecting to the marine stations, or they are going to the mall. Based on this analysis, now what they are doing, they have found there are certain routes have passengers specific to certain point of interest. Now, with this data and with this analysis, now they are parking or they are putting the bus in the correct spot so that people, when they get off from the bus, they don't have to walk much. And using this MPD data, they supported in raising the customer satisfaction of the station by 7%. So this is the 3 use cases that we cover in this presentation. However, there are more use cases that we have covered in the MPD handbook. We request you to please go and read the handbook, download the handbook, and this is a living document, as Dr. Raj mentioned. So any feedback on this document, or if you feel there are additional use cases, please let us know. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both for the excellent presentation. I think this is clearly a very rich resource for practitioners who are interested in expanding their use of mobile phone data in transport policy and in operations. And I'm really struck by the depth and the breadth of the use cases included here. And I'm happy to note that our presenters to come will also provide many different examples across the 8 different categories that you showed. One thing that really stuck with me from the presentation was how this Dubai bus station example really just shows how mobile phone data can help transport operators to really kind of extend their insights beyond their traditional domain to understand the whole passenger experience, right? So in this case, I think bus operators usually have a great sense of what's happening from the moment people board until the moment that they disembark through their smart card data. But this gives them a better idea of how people are using their facilities before and after the trips. So this is very impressive. A couple of quick housekeeping items. I just want to note that there is a Q&A function in the chat. So if you have any questions for our presenters, please feel free to add them there. I'll be monitoring the Q&A, and once the presentations are concluded, we'll have a discussion session where I'll select a few of your questions and direct them to our presenters. And just on another logistics note, I saw a question about the PowerPoint slides in the chat, so they will be shared online after the meeting. And so next, we have a presentation from Sam Rose, who's the Deputy Director of Advanced Analytics and the Head of Profession for Operations Research and Data Science at the Department for Transport in the UK. This presentation will focus on using mobile phone data sources to understand mobility patterns in a range of different applications. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you. I'm just going to share my slides. Hopefully that's okay for everybody. Hi folks, good afternoon. As Nicholas said, I'm from the UK's Department for Transport and I lead on our advanced analytics capability, and we have been sort of taking the internal lead for pushing forward all the discovery work on the use of this new data source. I'm going to take you through a little bit of an overview of all of the various ways that we have been using it and that we're trying to use it. And as Nicholas says, we've got a Q&A function, so if you want to hear any more about any of those use cases, you can pick up then. So by background, it's worth saying that since 2019 in the UK, the Department of Transport has been using this data source. And actually, I can pinpoint it to the day that the UK went into national lockdown. It's the first time that we brought this data source into the department. So I'm going to cover a range of things. So they are predictive in our national analytics during the COVID pandemic. Then a little bit about our modal split and our demographic splits. And by mode here, I mean kind of rail, road, active travel. And then a little bit about how we use it to detect kind of new modes and create new data sources. And then that in the UK quite complex service providers and bus service providers, and so there has been no single kind of data source that we can collect that looks at people traveling in general, and overarching travel that covers all of those modes. So what this data source gave us is the ability to look kind of from the top down, both in terms of all travel when you don't really care what type it is, but also down to increased granularity.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. We seem to have lost Sam. Maybe we'll give her just a minute to connect again. In the meantime, Sim, maybe you can be prepared to step in, and we'll see if Sam can reconnect. Well, I'm sorry about that, folks. Clearly, we're having some technical issues on Sam's side, but I think what we can do is move on to our next presenter now, and we'll come back to Sam's presentation. It's really great, and I really want you all to have the chance to see it. But if we could move on to Sim Esco. You ready? It looks like Jonas, maybe he needs the mic and video sharing rights.
No, you can use it. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So for our third presentation, which is actually now, I guess, our second presentation, Sim Esco from Positium will be talking about how to integrate mobile phone data and other data sets for transport planning applications. So Sim, please take it away.
Great. Yeah, I wish I could cover for Sam, but I think we need to hear her presentation as well. But I'll do my best to share some of the case studies we have, at least from Estonia and from some other countries. So my name is Sim Esco. I'm one of the leads to develop international projects in Positium. And Positium is a company that is solely focused on use of location data and how to make it work for planning in government and statistics. So I'm going to be talking about how to integrate this data set with other data sets, and for the purposes of modeling for transportation outcomes. So as I said, Positium has been working on location data, and especially the location data from mobile network operators for a long time in many different countries. And we've had over 300 projects already with mobile data, big and small. But here I've just noted some of the key examples from transportation, official statistics, and more from the national perspective, projects from a national perspective in different countries of the world. So when we go to urban planning and transport, then the main questions we have are, where do we find the people, and where do these people move in a long-term perspective, short-term, and also in some cases we want to look at the micro-term perspective. So we see that there are many different data sets that could provide those perspectives at different points in time or with different reliabilities. So here I've noted some of the more static data sets that we could use for long-term understanding of where people are, like registries and the census, which take time to update, and they're also quite static. Also, what we normally use in planning is household travel surveys and other surveys that could add information that we need. And in terms of how we move, we might be already used to working with some of the newer data sets, like using traffic loops or counters, using public transportation information and mobile apps. But it's mobile positioning data, or the data from mobile network operators, that is the glue, the best data set to connect both the population and origin destination data on a strategic scale. Right. So I see that Sam has joined, but I'll do my presentation and finish it. And if that's okay with Sam, then she can move in right after me. Okay. So I'm going to focus on just two case studies. I don't want to take more time, but one of them is from the urban perspective, urban transport analysis perspective, and the other is more on a national scale. And they are quite different in how we integrate the data sets. One uses modeling based on modeling with the more traditional tools like Emma, but the other one is Python-based pipeline. So first off, urban transport analysis. So the city of Tartu had a problem that they had a public transportation system that needed to be remodeled, but every time they tried to do this, it looked like there were political obstacles, planning obstacles, and there were none of the data sources actually available could actually give the information needed to complete this remodel. So what we did was to use many different data sources and integrate through MPD, and the result speaks for itself. So in terms of details, one of the problems was getting the data on journeys on the whole scale of the city. And for this, the central data source was mobile positioning data. So data from mobile network operators. Positium was the one that got this data, cleaned it, processed it to be used for the city. And even a city of 100,000 people, quite small in the global terms, created movement combinations. The OD matrix was 6 million 6 million records long. So quite a lot of different movement combinations. So even though we used big data, the output of that was still quite a sizable data set, which allowed us to go deeper into seasonality and also the movement between the different districts of people from home to work, and also to other places where they regularly visited. So that's the main data source, and then we compared that to the registries. So it turned out that instead of the registries, the main data source for home and workplaces still became still was the mobile network operator data, because that was more accurately showing the actual home and workplaces compared to registry data. That was the case in Tartu. And another data set that was quite crucial is the existing public transportation check-ins. What is the current demand for the public transportation network from the check-in data, from the car tabs, and comparing to mobile data, you could measure unmet demand with public transport. So which areas could not, the public transportation did not meet the existing demand for transport, and where you could have those places where you could have quite a sizable effect on when you change something in the network. And then, of course, land use data, different layers. What we did with surveys is to add qualitative aspects regarding the level of service. Of course, this needs to be added. But I think the last point, which is the journey planner application, is quite important here. Once the data has been was gathered, and WSP, which is a well-known modeling company, a transport modeling company, they ran the model and created new bus lines. Only then we used this survey or qualitative feedback application to gather feedback from the potential users about new network versus the old network. And still, the data came in at a record level on which kind of paths improved the outcome for travelers and which did not. So once we did all the data gathering, once all the planning was done, then the surveys and the journey planner application was used to just tweak the ultimate outcome in terms of the public network. So it was a data first approach, and this worked because if you know how much time it takes to remodel a network for public transport, then this process took 2 years altogether, from the start of the data collection from mobile operators to actually having new buses and the cycle network online as well. And we started new routes. Afterwards, we found that these new routes were very favored with the users. 30% more people used it regularly, so they bought 90-day tickets, so regular tickets to the public transport network, and almost all people were satisfied with the new network across all age groups. And the process continued to expand the network to the nearby municipalities. So a very use case driven approach, but here it worked very well in Tartu. And Tartu continues to use the mobile network operator data for other cases of urban planning. Okay, and the second example is about Estonian Transport Administration and how they used both mobile network operators, OD matrices, together with the road counters that they already had, both permanent and temporary, and how we help them integrate those two data sources and come up with a very robust average annual daily traffic estimation for all of the roads of the country. So as you might know, there are very many roads, and this is the road network in Estonia. You know, there are side highways, main highways, support highways, and so on, which is common for all countries. And you might also guess that there are some permanent counters already on the roads. This is also quite common. These are the red dots on the screen. And then there are temporary counters that go from place to place and stay there for 2 weeks at a time. So temporary counters cover most of the country, but they're only temporary, so they don't show you the seasonality. Modeling ADT from those is quite suspect. So how do you take the very reliable information from the permanent counters, and then add in the temporary counters, plus adding in all of the 1.5 million matrices from the mobile network operator, OD matrices. How do you combine them to create a more robust ADT result than you had before when you just had the counters? And the process is delineated here. So it takes 4 to 5 months to merge mobile network operator data and counter data and come up with the result. First time you do it, because a lot of the time will be spent on data collection, cleaning, and also the machine learning model development. So once you have a validated model and you have the final result delivery, then the repeat of that process, of course, can be done over the course of days or weeks after that. So now the Estonian Transport Administration has a tool which they can use to run a check on the ADT, anytime they choose, and it will be a painless approach. So there's a bit about the modeling, how the modeling works, and what kind of parameters we used, how the whole flow works, but I think I'll skip it for now, and you can still get the slides afterwards. The result is that the Transport Administration got ADT divided into different vehicle classes, 3 vehicle classes for all of the roads in the road network, and also self-service tool with all the documentation, so they can run it now themselves with MNO origin destination matrix data. Evaluation criteria was quite strict. What was the allowed difference compared to what they see from the counters? So you still had the permanent counters, which allowed this comparison between our modeled results and the counter results, and we fit those criteria well. So there's a quote in the bottom. It has been extremely successful and has significantly improved the ability of Estonian Transport Administration to make informed decisions on infrastructure investments and improvements on maintenance. So I'd like to leave you with that this is possible, and it's possible to use both a custom pipeline built with Python, or use Emme, as we did with the public transport reorganization project, and you too could have 24-hour graph of how the mobility works in your city, like you have in the example here from a different European city. So I hope what you take away from this is that it's possible, and it is possible to use these novel data sources to limit the time it takes to reorganize the public transportation network. And I would assume that this goes for both smaller cities, but also for bigger cities, and get a very good satisfaction rate from the result of the project. And you can extend the current counter network to the entire road network with mobile phone data as well. So use MNO data as a core data source, but this is not the only data source that you should be using for urban planning and transportation planning. Thank you very much.
Excellent work. Well, thank you, Siim. Thanks for the great presentation. What I found really compelling about the presentation is that how in both the public transport use case and the national road network use case is the attention to detail about how mobile phone data can complement existing data sources, as you mentioned there in your conclusion, I think these are both great examples of how, even though traditional planning methods were already sort of providing some insights for policy, the mobile phone data really provided like an extra boost of information and ultimately improved planning outcomes. I think also the second takeaway I had was just that you really started with a strong concept for how mobile phone data can be used, but also how to make sure that it's validated and sufficiently accurate for the application. I think that's really important to consider. And then lastly, I also really appreciated how you had clearly defined performance metrics for each project in order to actually measure success, which is so important, but also often overlooked. So I see that Sam has joined us again, and I think I speak for our audience when I say that, having seen in the first slide or two, we're really excited to see the rest of your presentation. So apologies for the technical difficulties, but please, Sam, go ahead and continue. Thanks.
Thank you, and sorry for that. With any luck, I'll stay around long enough to get to the end of the presentation this time. Right, I'm just going to pick up exactly where I left off in the interest of time. So what I was getting to on the COVID use case is that this data source gave us more information than we had previously, and in a nearer kind of real-time format. At this point, we were 1 day lagged. So you can see in the bottom right-hand corner that that bar graph, we were able to look at mobility at an hourly level and using some algorithms to determine what were commutes and what were non-commutes. And we were able to look at how that changed across the country at a relatively local level, what we call kind of a local authority level. But even more exciting for us is we were able to use this data to do some predictive mobility modelling. So this kind of dot and line graph you can see there in the back. For us, different bits of the UK were put under different restrictions at different times, confusingly. So there were different areas where kind of shops and restaurants have started opening up versus others that were under kind of higher restrictions, and that all related to kind of infection rates. And we were able to use this data along with our other kind of geographic data sources to create this predictive model, so we could see what we thought mobility was going to be like at the different levels of restrictions across the country. And as you can see here, our predictions were very, very close to what ended up being the reality. This was useful at the time, but more importantly, it's going to be useful for any other such case where we need to put in mobility restrictions, and we'll be able to do a better job of estimating what we think that impact will be on kind of national and local mobility. And then moving on to the modal split. And so those who have been in the UK for the last 18 months will know that we've had a significant amount of industrial actions on the railways. So this is rail drivers going on strike, overtime bans, lots of disruption to the way that our railways have worked. And it was important for us as the central department to have a good understanding up front of where we thought this was going to have the biggest impact in the country and on whom. So this data source allowed us for the first time to be able to take routes like London to Birmingham, for example, and have a look at what the modal split was. So what proportion of people travelling from London to Birmingham go by road versus by rail. And in doing that, we were able to identify the routes in the country that were going to be most affected by these by this industrial action. And the additional demographic information that we get from the mobile network data operators on things like spend power gave us an ability to look at who was most likely to be impacted. And it will be absolutely no surprise to you that those with lower spending power, those who were more restricted in having other options other than, rail journeys, were the most impacted. So now moving on a little bit to real-time monitoring. Again, this is using slightly different mobile network data. So this is using the events-based data rather than the trips-based, the origin destination-based. And we've had a few relatively large set piece events in the UK over the last couple of years. So our Queen died, and we had the Queen's funeral and all the associated events, and then we had our King's coronation. And the reason that this is important is because huge kind of public events, people tend to arrive at huge public events kind of in dribs and drabs over time, but people tend to leave huge public events all kind of at the same time at the end. And that has a risk of overwhelming our transport hubs and our transport network. And so we created, using this kind of near real-time monitoring, this is within 5-minute lagged data, to set up some information, as you can see here, and some alerts for our transport ops centre, which was looking at where kind of large numbers of people were at any given point, and sending alerts to when they got above a we kind of defined a previous maximum that had been coped with at previous events. So we're able to then set up those alerts for our ops centre so that they could coordinate with all the relevant bodies on the ground in terms of making sure we could cope with these kind of unprecedented large levels of people turning up into the transport network. Now I'm going to move on to some of the more experimental stuff that we're doing. So in the UK DFT, we have user research that has defined these transport personas. So these pictures and definitions you can see over here on the right, they're user research defined. So we have these collections of people. So we say, for example, urban professionals without a car, people who live in densely populated urban areas with lots of transport options and don't need to own cars. Versus these kind of guys in the middle here, where you see like less mobile and car reliant. So this might be more elderly or disabled people who need their cars to get around. And the reason we've created these is because we want to be able to test our policies, our transport policies, on these different people in the population. But these are user research based. And what we're looking at doing now is saying, can we combine our mobile network data with our survey data and our understanding of these personas to create a data-driven policy testing tool for the UK's Department for Transport, so that when we're developing policies, either national or at a local level, we have a better appreciation of how many of these different types of people are there in this area where this policy is going to impact, what proportion of this local population are going to be affected by reducing a bus service, for example. And then a quick counter through some more. I mentioned at the top new and novel data sources. The rollout of the electric vehicle fleet is crucial to our ability to deliver our transport decarbonisation plan, as it is in many countries. But previously, we've only had an awareness of the fact that these vehicles have been bought and where they've been registered. We haven't had a very good understanding of where they're being driven around, where they're being used. And obviously, this is a big data gap in our ability to not only make sure we're targeting our investments in local infrastructure, but also evaluate the larger plan as a whole. So we're in the process of doing a piece of work where we're looking at mobile network data to be used for evaluation of these policies. So the mobile network operators are providing us with a data set that is looking to combine the traditional mobile network data that we've talked about with an appreciation of those that are being used, those that are using electric vehicles. So they're using data coming out of the back of apps where somebody has either interacted with an electric vehicle charge point or is using an electric vehicle app to access their car, to lock and unlock their car. And then when that person who's used the app then takes a journey that looks like a road journey, they're flagging that as an electric vehicle journey. Now, obviously, we can have a further discussion on the accuracy of that, and that's the discovery that we're doing at the moment. But what that will give us is a much better appreciation of where these vehicles are being used, how they're being used, and critically, how that changes as a result of our investments in local infrastructure. And then the same is true for freight and heavy goods vehicle movements, is that we've had no single national data set that tells us all about where freight vehicles are driving around. So we'll be looking at this data to give us additional information on where they're travelling, where they're stopping, in order that we can better plan for that zero emission infrastructure these vehicles will need to accelerate the rollout in the fleet. And then finally, the other example I've just put on there is we recently, maybe a year ago, opened our first new tube line in London in over 30 years. And what's really exciting about this is you can imagine, London has lots of transport networks already, but we were wanting to see what effect this had on travel times across the capital. And what this data source is allowing us to look at is how much that has changed at the minute by minute level. So it gives us a whole new data set to support the evaluation of the opening of that new line. And then quickly, I just wanted to touch on lessons and challenges. So for us in the UK, and I know this is different with other nations, but for us, this is a commercial data set that requires significant funding. And even across government, we are still working to coordinate how we can procure collectively and share across the different departments and the different levels of government, so that when we're spending this money, we're creating better value for the taxpayer. And politically, the way our funding works in the UK, we have these funding rounds, and at the moment, because we're in the middle of a funding round, it is difficult for us to kind of take money that's been invested in these large set piece surveys and redirect it for this kind of procurement. So for teams like mine, we have to find new money essentially to be able to buy this data to do this work, which is a real challenge. And then quickly on coverage, and I think most people know this already, but just to touch on from my point of view, this data set is great on telling us where people do go. It doesn't tell us where people want to go. And so for us, as the UK's DFT, we are trying to link this data with other data sets that tell us where people can go, with the idea being that that delta between where they do go and where they can go will indicate a problem to us. And that's either an economic problem, that the transport routes are unaffordable, or potentially a reliability issue, that if we can't rely on public transport, then people aren't going to take it because they can't plan for it. And also coverage can be limited, and particularly when we're looking at things like total data sets, and we want to look at the movement of children and travelling to school. Obviously, we've got a challenge with this data set. And then finally, obviously, our short journeys are lost with a lot of this data. And it really does vary across the country for us, where we've got some heavily densely populated areas with lots of cell towers versus our more sparsely populated rural areas where our cell towers are further apart. The proportion of those short journeys that are lost varies across the country. And I think we're going to pick up some questions later. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sam, for the incredibly informative presentation. You touched on so many interesting applications that I think each could have probably been a separate presentation, but I appreciate the overview that you gave. So I think for me, that presentation really drove home how mobile phone data can unlock much more rapid decision-making and data-driven policy-making than traditional sources can, both in the short term for these special event monitoring applications, but also in the medium term for rapid response to transport needs during the pandemic. I think it's clear that mobile phone data is allowing for transport operations that are a lot more responsive to the needs of the traveling public. And then a couple of quick things that you mentioned that I think are really important. We at the ITF have been grappling for a long time about how best to manage the externalities of urban freight movements and deliveries by heavy vehicles in urban areas. And one of the major challenges we always run into is just a lack of data. So I'm definitely going to be following your work on that front quite closely. And then lastly, I just want to highlight, even though this was something that you mentioned towards the end of your presentation, for our audience, the final point, which is that this data can really only show you where people are going and not where they want to go. And so we need to be careful about assuming that transport systems should focus only on providing for the trips that we can measure in the data set. It's important to ask ourselves where people might want to go but cannot go, and how that information can be collected as well. So thank you so much. Next, we have two co-presenters, Reinhard Schwarzenegger, project manager in management and strategic planning for the Austrian Federal Railways, will be joined by Dr. Michael Chick, the co-founder and chief scientific officer at Invenium Data Insights. And I apologize, I live next to a church, so if you can hear those church bells going off right now. So these two will be presenting results from their project on analyzing passenger flows using mobile phone data. So gentlemen, over to you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Reinhard Schwarzenegger, and I want to start with the project of passenger flow analysis. First, my colleague Michael Chick will present Invenium and what the company is doing.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Reinhard. Warm welcome also from my side here from Austria, from Graz here, we are located. And I'd like to give you some short insight what Invenium is doing, where I'm coming from, and then we will give a little bit detailed information of a typical project in Austria, this passenger flow analysis. We're dealing together with the ÖBB, the Austrian railway operator, the Invenium, and the A1. The A1 is the Austrian telco operator with a market share of around about 42%. And I'm starting with Invenium because I'm not only working at Invenium, I'm also from the Graz University of Technology. I'm there a transport scientist. I'm also deputy head of the institute. And I'm working now around about 15 years with mobile phone data. So we started around about 2010 with different research projects, how it is possible to use empirical data of mobile phone for the calibration or validation of traditional transport models. So I'm out the area of macroscopic transport models, which are used all over the world for different scenario planning and infrastructure planning in the future. And we said at this time, okay, is there a possibility to use additional information next to stationary countings or surveys and so on? And on this time, we said, okay, a possibility is mobile phone data, how we can use the trajectories of mobile phone data, of mobile monitoring systems, of telcos to implement it in typical transport models. Next slide. Or next point, I think there is another. Yeah, we started then in Austria with this research project, and the topic is that we're doing this now since 2016, also in a commercial way. So Invenium is a spin-off of the Graz University of Technology. The years before, we did a lot of research project in the area of how we can analyze, for example, trip purpose, how we can analyze the transport mode based on mobile phone data. We also made a lot of development in case of building holistic data models. So not only using mobile phone data, also stationary data, survey data, Wi-Fi data, GPS data, application data in a holistic modeling world, using for different applications. And as Invenium, we're doing this now in Austria on a commercial way since 8 years now. We're doing this also in other countries, for example, Slovenia. We're doing this also, for example, in Germany with the Telefonica Odoo. So we have a bright aspect and brand of what we are doing and how we use the different data. We're doing this not only in transport, but this is our main focus topic in transport modeling, also information, but we're doing this also in city planning. We're doing this in tourist areas, so touristic insights based on what tourists are doing over the day, what are the origin, what are the destinations of the trips, and so on. Analysis of socio-demographic information, also of roaming information, which is included in the mobile network data. And we are doing this also in different business areas like advertising and so on. So everywhere where mobile phone data based on mobility analysis is usable, we are doing this. Next slide, please. And I think what is very important, we built as Invenium a whole pipeline. Invenium is not part of the A1 Telekom Austria. The majority of Invenium is now in the A1 included. So it is a little bit more possible from our side to work with this data than if you're an additional third-party company where you're not integrated in such a big telco. We also did the whole pandemic analysis here in Austria. We did it also in Slovenia, Serbia, and so on, where we are allowed to take this data and what we're doing. And for me, what only one of the slides in Austria, which was very important, we had in Ischgl here. This is a tourism hotspot where the different people are departure when the lockdown here in Austria started, and this was so the eye opener here in Austria, how it is possible to use this data and how it is also possible to use the data in different transportation area use cases. I think one important part, we'll give that to Reinhard, is that we started between 2013 and 2016 a big data project here in Austria based on data privacy, how it is allowed to use this data and how it is necessary to anonymize this data to provide it to different customers. So this was one very, very important part. And we are doing this also now. We have different projects which always focus on the topic of data privacy, how it is allowed, what is allowed. and for me, it's often very, very important to also explain to customers, but also the people outside, that, for example, mobile phone data is not accurate, for example, than GPS data. So there is a big difference. Also in different countries, there is a big difference in case of accuracy, what the mobile phone network is providing here to an analytics company or some transport modelers. But in the next project we'd like to present to you, we took really the data, we built a big product and also a big project. Is one of our biggest projects. We already have as Invenium and ÖBB together, really to see what is possible with this data in a very specific use case, and in a very specific use case where a lot of resources and people are working on. So Reinhard, please.
Yes, we started our cooperation project in 2018 because at my transport company, Federal Railways ÖBB, we didn't get the passenger data from the railway companies anymore. So we've wanted to analyze the passenger demand using this mobile phone data. We set up 6 different use cases, and we wanted to provide a basis for the internal planning purposes, and also to develop an internal analytic tool, and to be able to analyze the data that we get from that. It is a cooperation between A1 Telekom Austria, where this anonymized floating phone data is coming from. And this data comes to Invenium that creates, maintains, and enhances the algorithm platform. And in my company, we provide the actual train timetable on a daily basis for Invenium, so that they can calculate and calculate the data in general. The different use cases that we have is the entering and exiting passengers per station. We have the station-based origin and destination metrics, also including the transfer passengers. We have the loads of passengers on the cross sections. We are doing analysis of delays. We have the origin and destination metrics for our transport demand model in Austria. We have the catchment areas of stations based on the home activity of the mobile phone users. And of course, also sometimes we have special analysis to give examples and to go into details of specific problems on our network.
Yeah, now a short overview. What is the method we're using here? So if anybody is interested in more details, do not hesitate to contact me after the presentation here. So what you're doing, we're taking the trajectories over the day of the different IDs. So really each SIM card or each smartphone, we're taking this in A1. A1 is then anonymizing this whole data, and Invenium built with one together a probabilistic model based on different machine learning algorithms, where we take these trajectories over the day, weighted on the market share and different additional registration informations. And what we're doing then is we are putting this trajectory of the different smartphones on the train timetable and analyzing based on different features. Okay, if people are entering with a possibility the train or exiting the train. And at the end of the day, the idea is really to have the whole information of the entering and exiting train stations here in Austria. We have around about 1,050. And we also have the route information, so where they are entering and where they are exiting. And the next topic was very important, is we have the trajectory all over the day. So we already know what was the trip before and what is the trip after the information when they're using the railway operator here. We are dealing in Austria with around about 3.2 million IDs over the day. One ID is generating around about 800 to 900 coordinates per day per timestamp. If you have, for example, a really heavy user like me. I have around about 10,000 coordinates per day, so it's quite a lot of number of points you have on this way path and what you're doing. And A1 provides the data where we are also calculating on the A1 data cluster here. The A1 is the Invenium then is doing the whole modeling, the whole extrapolation, and also the quality control. And what the ÖBB does is really to do the quality accuracy tests in this way. Reinhard will explain on the next slide, and manage and provides all the things with the results. And they are already using the whole results of the different use cases in different applications then.
Yes, to do that, we set up a very high quality empirical passenger counting. The design and the organization and the implementation was done by my department. And we were able to count about 142 stations since 2019. And this was done on the station and also in the trains. What was very important for us is that we have high quality in this empirical passenger counts. So it was necessary for us to have the numbers of the entering and exiting passengers per train. And we spent a lot of time to train and to train the personnel that we used to count these passengers. And we also had for each count we had the persons to give a certain index for this count, so that it is possible for us only to use high confidence counts. So if people had the impression that their counting was not very valuable, they gave a bad mark on this count, and we filtered these results and only used the best results for the validation of the model. Next is the quality. So Matty, can you please explain the quality improvements of our project?
Yeah. So as Reinhard said before, really one of the main topics here in this project was really then to have over many years a quality insurance, so a quality what is getting better at the end of the really to improve it. And what we're doing now really is we developing together every year new features in case of the monitoring system of the A1. We're dealing with individual parameters, for example, for urban and rural areas. We are improving the accuracy of the cellular network coverage in this case. We're doing in the algorithms, for example, where we are optimizing different parameters in long distance trains. If you have, for example, in Austria, a Vienna main line where you have a very urban area, really to increase the quality or improve the quality of the results in this case. A very, very valuable topic is also that you have to do a better quality at the end of date on the extrapolation of the data, because what is very important is at the end of the day the quality of the results of the analysis. If you have, for example, very, very small numbers, in this case, the relative difference is higher. So you have, in case of small results, a higher variance. This is already in our case here. Also, if you have a small train station, for example, the the accuracy of the results is lower than in higher station. I think this is quite normal, but also for future in this cooperation project, we are doing a lot of improvements. We are now implementing also the whole 5G networking topic in Austria. We are optimizing our algorithms every year. We are now on the version 6 in this case, really to have a better and quite good evaluation and validation of the whole results we are dealing here. Next slide.
Yeah, and I want to tell something about the strengths and the weaknesses of the project. A real strength is that we have a consistent method, and it is continually calculated, so we get the results from every day and the next day in our data warehouse. We have the entire journey from origin to destination, which is very important for the transport planning. We have different time aggregations. We can also distinguish different train categories. During the pandemic, it came out that it is a pandemic-proof method, and because of the fully automated calculation. And of course, like Michael mentioned, then we have high quality results for medium and high categorized stations. On the other hand, we have a lot of stations, of course, where we have less than 200 passengers per day, and there the variation of the results is higher and the quality is lower. Then the quality improvements are dependent on the cellular network expansions. We have also the difficulty of parallel traffic flows, especially roads nearby the stations or nearby the route. And it will always be necessary to do our validation counts, because we want to improve the quality, but of course it's more expensive for us to organize and to pay for the staff who's doing that. Then what are the practical applications that we already have for this data? We have the statistics of passengers throughout the pandemic. It was a necessary information for the management. It is shown here on the chart on the right side, where you can see the passengers' weekly average, starting from the start of the pandemic in spring 2020, where the numbers go down. Went down to about -80 to -85%. The green line is the line for the intercity trains or long distance trains, and the blue line is the line for the local trains. You can see that the recovery of the intercity trains was better. And now we are already at about between 40 to 60% more than before the pandemic. So this is also creating a capacity problem in Austria that we have to deal with now. During the pandemic, we also took the data to get public funding for the operation of the line Vienna-Salzburg, and we got the necessary data from this project. Then, of course, for internal planning purposes, we are already using this mobile phone data. We also are doing more and more special analysis, like for park and ride stations, for route closures, like tunnels that are closed in the future, and we are checking how many people are affected by these problems. Then we are making individualized reports that we are supplying to other departments. The data, as I said before, is used for the national Austrian transport model. And we have also some pilot projects to supply the data to rail operating companies who are doing their prognosis for their passengers with this data. And we have a project, a pilot project to get automatic passenger counting data for the validation of our manually counted data, and also with the mobile phone data. This gives us more options to validate and to improve the algorithm.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, only 1 or 2 sentences. We started with a research project in 2017 together with the ÖBB. We are now really a running product. So we're calculating every morning for the day before, every train station entering, exiting the people, every OD metrics, every trend in this case. We build also from the backend to the front end different dashboard, for example. This is an overview of stations of the trends and so on. And it's provided to the ÖBB infrastructure. It's also provided for the whole ÖBB holding management in this case, so that you have every day an information which is automatically generated of the whole overview of what passengers are doing at the railway operator here in Austria. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you both. This is really fascinating stuff. And so, yeah, I just want to thank you for your presentation. You know, I really appreciate how the whole program today is balancing both the sort of breadth of possible applications, but also some really deep dives into the specifics and details of specific applications. And I think your presentation, excuse me, like Siem's presentation earlier, really underlined the advantages in some cases of having a sophisticated data collection and analysis partner like Invenium or Positium involved in these projects, just so that the transport operator can really focus on what they do best, which is, you know, translating insights into operational improvements. I think you also drove home the importance of constantly iterating and improving the methods to produce better results. And then lastly, I just really appreciated this sort of internal data platform development approach, where once you set up the collection and analysis pipeline, it can be used to support, you know, all kinds of different initiatives and to answer different questions within the organization. And, you know, I've seen that in transit agencies as well.
Thanks.
So then rounding out our presentations for today, we have Viviana Munoz Diaz, who is an expert consultant on big data for transport in Latin America for CAPTCH, and a board member of the Chilean Society of Transportation Engineering. So Viviana, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Nick. I will share my screen. So can you see my slides, my presentation?
Yes, you can see them well.
Right. Perfect. So, well, in my presentation, I will talk about the estimation of urban mobility using MPD, with focus on the challenges that I see so far. Well, the agenda of my presentation has 4 points. I will go briefly for the motivation, and then I will talk about 2 different kinds of data, of mobile phone data. The fusion of data provided by an app specific for activity-based travel, and with fusion with the MNO data, with data provided by telecom companies. And at the end, I will let some takeaways. So the motivation at first. I will start for an issue that it's very important to have into account, and what the urban mobility patterns are for. And about that, I would like to say that we have 2 different objectives that we face in a very different way of from the methodological point of view. So, first of all, for diagnosis of urban transport systems, it's commonly used or asked by the authorities of the cities, or maybe it's needed for the operational planning, or in general for any transport or land use analysis that the city needs. But the other objective is very important also, but it's a kind of specific, is for calibrating strategic transport models in transport, what are needed for the social appraisal of structural project plans or for public policies in cities. So those different objectives determine different ways of facing the transport analysis or the restrictions for the data that we can use. Well, that's what I will go deeply in the next slides. But in the other point, on the other bullet, I would like to talk about my experience in Latin America, working with digital data in cities of Latin. So I would like to say, or to highlight, that here in Latin America, we have highly congested cities. We have normally informal operation of public transport with uncertain in travel time and waiting time for the users, for the passengers, fare evasion, and also very complex trips. I mean, multiple legs of the trips, many care trips, commonly done by women. So with this motivation, I would like to say that we few years ago, we started to work on urban mobility patterns using big data, and particularly using mobile phone data. So for estimating urban mobility patterns, I would like to distinguish these two branches, two different branches. And the mobility patterns that we can use, it will depend on the long-term or the short, medium-term decision that you, as a decision maker, needs to do. In the second row, you can see that I'm talking about the short, medium-term decisions. In short, medium-term decisions, I mean talking about the analysis of infrastructure management or transport demand management, or usually operation plans that you need to design. Nowadays, or historically, we use always partial information, but with the mobile phone data and all the collaboration of the ecosystem with digital data, we can now do it much better than we used to do. So with the telecom data and the information of the crowdsourcing data as TomTom or maybe Waze that you can use, or the use of applications specifically for transportation, you can use or build what I call dynamic mobility patterns. And they are very important and useful for all the authorities or the decision maker that needs to solve some short, medium decisions. What can I say with that? What I say to that? All the projects that has a low cost of reversal has a plenty opportunities now to be done much better than before using the digital data. But in the first row, I will talk about long-term decisions in transportation. I mean, when you need to use those urban mobility patterns for decisions related with the appraisal, the social appraisal of urban transport policies or strategic transport plans, that's different because the cost of reversal is higher. I mean, where do you design the next subway lane, for instance? The cost of reversal, of course, is different. So in that kind of project, we usually need at least in Latin America, but I think in the whole the world, we need methodologies, strictness of the methodologies, you know, and we used to use the household travel survey that are the most important tool to solve and to respond to the methodologies about the social appraisal of projects, of strategic projects. So now, and that's where my slides will be focused on, is about how you can solve these household travel surveys with MPD, with mobile phone data. And in that way, you can build a digital household travel survey. And it's made by the fusion of data provided by a specific app plus data provided with a telecom company data. So this is the big picture of the model that we're trying to build. And this in the left side of the slide, we can see the multi-channel platform, and that's a platform that gathered all the data provided by the respondent of a survey, where we use as a principal tool an app, specific app for travel, for diary of activities with the travel insight, and also with some complementary tools. Basically, because not all the people can want and accept to use an app, because some issues that I will describe ahead. So we need another kind of tools to have a representative sample of users of the transport system. Well, this multi-channel platform is fusioned with MNO data, with mobile network operator data. So in urban systems, what we are trying to do is to solve the multi-channel platform. What they give us, all the attributes of the trips. I mean, split mode, precisely travel time, and all the things that we need specifically for calibrating the classic models of transport. And the fusion with MNO data, where we want to achieve is with MNO data, try to estimate the origin destination trips in urban systems with no any other feature. So that's what we're trying to do. We have tried to do. And with data fusion, I think we can achieve a digital and updated HTS because of the MNO data that could feed us with permanent information about the origin destination trips. I want to say something that's very important. I don't know if it was clear enough, that this model that I'm talking about is about it take into account that we need to calibrate the classic transport models. So the classic modeling approach that we use in transportation is household-based. So the challenge is that we need to gather the data of households, the complete household, not just for individuals that are available to support and to give their information, to participate on this kind of survey. So, well, here I have a slide that show very briefly about how are the apps specifically done for for travel surveys. So this apps, it's a very good app that I had the opportunity to use. And in the right side, you can see how easily can be seen by the respondent. That kind of apps make a timeline with the path of your trips and activities based on the sensors of the smartphone, it doesn't have anything to do with the telecom data. So here we can see, for instance, how the sensor of the telephone, of course, with the GPS that in the house, in the telephone, how it can identify when you are in your home, at what time you can go out from your home, where or when do you arrive to a place, a specific place, and then you can have, for instance, a very precisely travel times or dual times in your activities, and that thing on the regular HDS are not are kind of weak, so it could help us to do it much more better if we can use this kind of information. So, having used this kind of app for a while, I can say that we have some findings that I would like to share with the audience about my particular experience in this kind of apps. I can say that these kind of apps are very accurate on detecting destinations, and when you are having change, you're making change of different modes, the legs of the trip, it can detect. Also can detect very good in a very good way. The waiting time that when you're changing the mode of travel. But we were very happy with that. But it's not the same with the mode inference. And I think that maybe it's because the urban transport in developing countries has a different behavior in comparison with developed countries. Because of the urban system are kind of different, not regulated. It's not so easy to detect, for instance, the public transport, because in most of the cities we don't have specific bus stops where we have in many cities the bus stops are not respected enough. So it's not easy for the intelligence of the telephone can identify pretty well that kind of split modes. So with the mode inference, I think that for LATAM, I'm not sure it works okay. So I think that we have a challenge ahead because of that. But then I think I would like to highlight what is for me the most important challenge and using this kind of tool. And it's about the behavior of the respondent of this kind of applications. And I'm talking about the learning curve of using these apps. These apps are specific, and I have seen how you can identify clearly some early adopters of this technology that they're happy to use it, and so they will be happy to share the information, but that's not for the whole people, of course. Some people it's difficult to understand. For instance, for the elderly people, could be a challenge. Also, this is very important information about the challenge of gaining the trust of the household members that we need to be in the survey. I think that it's by far the more complex issue of this kind of information, because people feel and think that maybe, for instance, you will give this information for their work or for the government, so they start feeling or think that they will be followed by the government, for instance. And it's of course not. All of this information I didn't say, but it's very important to say and to highlight that this information, of course, is anonymized before that you give to the public sector or the city that need to use this kind of tool. Well, and of course, also some challenge is to use instead to fill out the household travel survey. You know that maybe some people could be happy to collaborate with this information, but then as this information is remote, you feel that you don't feel you feel less available to be to collaborate with this data, because you have to, in some point of the day, you have to validate the information, because of course this kind of tool could make wrong inferences. So we need to the people, to the respondent, to fix it, to change it. So that's very complicated to get the validation of the respondent. And also I will follow telling that the complementary tools are very important for child and elderly people. And if you use it, you need to have a full integrated tool, because if not, there are many problems with the implementation in the field that can make you very hard to implement this kind of solution for you. Then, finishing my presentation, I will go very briefly. My co-speakers talk a lot about use cases of using mobile phone network operators data for estimating trips. So I would like to finish with some recommendations about maybe it could be useful to have it into account if some city wants to use it. First of all, there are different type of data on the telecom companies. I have seen at least 3 kind of data, and they have different spatio-temporal resolutions. So I suggest to analyze first and how it fits about your needs, your necessities of transport analysis. And if not, of course, you can have solutions with the data with the integration of some of different kind of data that you can use, as the co-speakers have talked about. And also this issue of different methodologies. Different telecom company you have, the different methodology they apply, of course. And what the recommendation for me is to ask about the robustness of the methodology that they use. About validation of the information, it's very important to ask for validation, because you have to know that this data is not a magic solution. You need to embrace, but asking for some validation are very important to do. Also, I would like to say that estimating urban trips is by far different of estimating interurban trips, because of the complexity of the urban trips. I mean, the congestion and the dual time and intermediate stops or your trips can make you estimation of more trips than the urban system has. And this slide is the takeaway that I would like you to have from my presentation. But it's common for mobile phone data, but also with it in general with digital data that you use for transportation. The mobile phone data has the full potential to be used for obtaining a complete monitoring of mobility patterns. The data fusion is the key in most of the cases, but it's not a magic solution, as I already said. I recommend that you ask for validation of the estimation that they use. Maybe you can ask for a test zero, comparing the information with another data set. Could be with the ground truth, I mean. Digital data, of course, enables to have a better formulation and monitoring public policy in transportation. And as a very highlight of my presentation, it's very different the estimation of mobility patterns when you need to a long-term decision making from the short-term decision making. If you have to decide or something strategic for your city, you have to ask for methodological reliability, and that's essential, because that the cost of reversal is very important, very important. It's and it's so different with short-term decision making, because here the detailed data now has the whole opportunities. You know, the cost of reversal of the transportation, the operational plan of some buses, it's different. You can improve it with different kind of data, the integration of kind of data, and in this line of short or medium-term decision making have many use cases available, and I think that we have now the opportunities to use plenty. And data quality is crucial, as always has been. All the analogical data has had problems also. Data quality here with the digital data, it's not different. So the methodology and the data quality is very important. And at the end, it's very important to take into account the ethical standards that we need, because with spatial temporal data from the citizens, we have to deal with sensitive data, of course, and personal data eventually. So it's crucial to have an approach with ethical standards, and also to obtain social license to use the kind of data, because maybe that's very important to have it into account. So this is most of the things that were talked, and the difference between this kind of data that I talk about, I mean, data provided by an app with data provided by a mobile phone operator is in the MPD handbook. So you are invited to check it. Thanks. Thanks a lot for the opportunity to speak about.
Yeah, thank you so much, Viviana. That was very interesting and information-packed presentation as well. I'm really grateful that you gave us a detailed conceptual framework at first for classifying different applications of mobile phone data depending on the timescale and the decision horizon. I think that's a really helpful way to think about possible applications when we've seen so many today. And I also appreciated the in-depth discussion of the challenges of data fusion between mobile phone data and other sources of trip information. It was a nice compliment, I think, to Seem's presentation earlier on sort of similar topics, but in a different application. And then finally, I think your, your point on about the capacity for mobile phone data to capture complexity in urban travel patterns is a really important one. In the transport policy community, I think we're more and more interested in understanding not just how and when people are traveling, but also their trip purposes and what sort of challenges they might encounter. And this sort of space-time trajectory data that's enabled by mobile phone data is a really great step in that direction. So thank you. So at this stage, our presentations are now concluded, and we will move very briefly into the discussion phase of this webinar. We are a little bit short on time, but I'm also glad we got the chance to hear these excellent presentations from all of our speakers today. So we may have time for one or two questions from the audience. I see one already, so I think we'll maybe start there. But if anybody else has any questions, please add them to the chat, and we'll do our best to get to perhaps one more after this. So the first question that I see from Masego, he's talking about, for countries that are still using household travel surveys and looking for alternative sources or looking to just pilot mobile phone data, whether there's any sort of support or training that can be offered. And so I think this is a great question. I assume a lot of members of the audience have joined today because they're interested in using mobile phone data in their own context, and maybe they're just unfamiliar with the particulars. So maybe we can start with Dr. Raj, if you would mind, maybe giving some advice to Masego and to the others on the call.
Sure. So if you're just a practitioner and not actually looking into, let's say, the actual software code, you can actually find some of the information in the handbook that I think Bijit already put the link in the chat box. So it has what are the processing that's required, what are the pros, what are the cons, what are the things that you need to keep in your mind when you use mobile phone data in lieu or in support of household travel service. Apart from that, as Sim put in the chat box, it will be a good idea for you to join the sub-team for mobile phone data and transport and commuting, because we are putting together some sort of training materials, including some sort of, I would say, synthesized mobile phone data so that users can actually learn how to convert mobile phone tracks to actual origin destination matrices. So I think these are the two things that I can think of. So as a first step, look into the handbook. It will give you I would say, the process-oriented information and considerations, and also join the task team. And I think we are all very close to finalizing the training materials. Probably would be launched in June or July this year.
Great. Thank you so much. And we have one more question from Mala, and I think maybe this would be best to direct towards Jonas, but there's a suggestion that the Economic Commission for Africa tried to mobilize resources and develop maybe a pilot project aimed at some of these mobile phone data initiatives in selected member states, and possibly in collaboration with the Regional Big Data Hub and its development partners. So I was curious if there's anything that you could share, Jonas, on upcoming activities from the ECA, or if there's any sort of interest in pursuing something like this.
Actually, that's the suggestion for the previous question. My colleague Molla was responding to the previous question. That's his answer.
I see. Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I can agree that I think it's a great suggestion as well.
Yeah, so he's saying that ECA tries to mobilize resources to develop projects. So instead of just having webinars, so we are trying to have real projects. So by adopting the methodologies and the handbooks developed by the UN mobile phone data. So this is what he was trying to suggest.
I see. Excellent.
If I may, I actually, in the past, we've come up with development account projects which runs for 2 years or so, or 3 in some cases. And we have also our PTC project funding, which is a kind of short term. I think we have a platform to mobilize resources, even with partners, to kind of pilot this kind of projects, to see on the ground how they are going to transpire, rather than, we have heard webinars, trainings, and, we have listened to many of these kind of initiatives. I think we need to go to the actual implementation and see the results concretely in Africa.
Yes, great. Well, thank you so much for your intervention. I appreciate that, for the clarity as well. So I think, unfortunately, we are sort of getting towards the end of our session here. So I'll just take this opportunity now to wrap up the webinar with some closing remarks and an overview of some of the next steps. So first, I think I'd like to just summarize quickly some of the most important messages and takeaways that I gathered, at least from the excellent presentations today. I think first, the biggest takeaway is just simply how many interesting and useful applications there are for mobile phone data and transport. From hourly reports on crowd volumes during major events to redesigning an entire bus network. There's so much that mobile phone data can be used for. And some of the biggest advantages are that it provides information at a greater spatial and temporal resolution, but it also allows transport providers to look into the behavior of their customers beyond the boundaries of their system, or expand their insights to places where it might not have been feasible to collect data from traditional sources. I think second, it's important to note how many resources are out there for people who are interested in initiating new applications. And here I'm very grateful for the work of the UN task team on mobile phone data and the big data regional hubs for creating and compiling these resources. And then moving just to some of the challenges we heard about today, another takeaway I think is that while mobile phone data is widely available, it varies considerably in quality, in coverage, and even in content depending on the location and the telecom provider. Sam mentioned that they were able to get an indication of spending power from the telecom data, which I assume is probably not the case in some other places. So it's important to understand the features of the data that's available in your jurisdiction and then the conditions under which it can be accessed before you go about pursuing some of the applications that you might have seen today. I think it's also important to be deliberate in how you incorporate mobile phone data into your processes and how you integrate it with existing data sources as well. Having a plan for validating your data and for measuring the success of your application is really important. And then lastly, my last takeaway was that while mobile phone data can certainly provide a rich new source of information, it's not a silver bullet for all problems. You have to consider what it's not capturing and whether that's unmet demand for trips or trips by people who do not use mobile phones, and identify other methods for collecting that information as well. So I really hope that our audience enjoyed the engaging and informative discussion today. I'd also just like to thank our distinguished presenters for taking the time to share their expertise with us. And also, again, just a big thank you to the UN Task Team on Mobile Phone Data and the UN Big Data Regional Hub for Africa for organizing this event and for managing all the logistics. And finally, I just want to leave you with some next steps. If you are interested in learning more about the work of the UN Big Data Regional Hubs and the Task Team on Mobile Phone Data, first, you will be able to find all of today's presentations on the Big Data Regional Hub for Africa website under the Events tab. They're not available yet, I don't believe, but should be posted rather soon, so keep an eye out for that. You can also find more information about upcoming events in this webinar series on the same website. I believe the next webinar will take place on May 18th, looking at how mobile phone data can be used in support of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And then second, I would encourage you, as many of our other speakers have also done, to review the methodological guidelines on the use of mobile phone data, which are available on the UN Statistics Mobile Phone Data website. There's several different guides, including one for transport statistics there. And as has been mentioned, these guides are living documents. So if you have any new applications or use cases that you would like to contribute, please suggest them to the development team. And then finally, if you're interested in becoming involved with the work of the UN Task Team on Mobile Phone Data and have some relevant experience or expertise, you're more than welcome to submit an application. And this is also on the UN Statistics Mobile Phone Data website. If you scroll to the bottom of the page, you'll find a link labeled Join Our Community. And I think this is a great opportunity for all of those in the audience to help shape and disseminate the work of the task team and to promote the use of mobile phone data for sustainable development. So that's it. On behalf of the presenters and the organizers, I just want to say thank you to you all so much for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicholas.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you, Nicholas.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jonas.
Thank you.